Now, there's one other thing I want to cover related to this, or like directly related. Like, there's one other thing I want people to know, other than Sundar's apology, which we'll talk about in a minute. I wanted to look at her paper. I didn't read the paper because I didn't have time, but I read the MIT review of the paper. So, are they biased? Yeah, probably, whatever. But I'm going to go with the review of the paper. The paper that was rejected. And the reason I want to set context on this is because when you start thinking about Google as a business, look, we might not like Google. I know we don't like a lot of Google. We always talk about a lot of things we hate about Google, but they are a large corporation that's pretty effective at moving their agenda forward. We may hate their agenda sometimes, but they know what they're doing, right? So, and they're not doing anything that's uncommon in terms of management. So they are really heavily invested in these models of language. They're called like large language models. So language models are things that kind of can predict what you might say, what you might write. They can be used, like they're the things when you type in a search and it auto completes. That can be a language model, or maybe even better when you type in an email. You know how they started to deploy this thing where you type in an email and it starts to like, "Dear Mom,
yeah,
I'd like happy," and they complete Mother's Day. Like, I don't like it, but like that's all. Those are language models, and there are some legit She's got some worries about some large language models. So large language models are models that have like literally over 1 million parameters to them, and they can get very complex. And just so you see what I'm talking about, I'm going to show you. Here's an example. Because this might blow your mind if you're not familiar with AI language stuff. You can use these language models to write stuff that looks real.
Wow.
And this is a risk. So in this case, I'm going to read this. You give the language model a system prompt. So a human wrote what I'm about to read, which is the headline. A train carriage containing controlled nuclear materials was stolen in Cincinnati today. Its whereabouts are unknown. So that's it. That's what the human wrote. On its first try, the language model, the algorithm running the language model, writes the rest of this. And I'm going to read it so that you can see it's better written than BuzzFeed, and it sounds pretty legit. The incident occurred at the downtown train line, which runs from Covington and Ashland stations. In an email to Ohio news outlets, the U.S. Department of Energy said it is working with the Federal Railroad Administration to find the thief. Quote, "The theft of this nuclear material will have significant negative consequences on public and environmental health, our workforce, and the economy of our nation," end quote, said Tom Hicks, the U.S. Energy Secretary, in a statement. Quote, "Our top priority is to secure the theft and ensure it doesn't happen again," end quote. The stolen material was taken from the University of Cincinnati's Research Triangle Park Nuclear Research site, according to a news release from department officials. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission did not immediately release any information. According to the release, the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Security is leading the team's investigation. Quote, "The safety of people, the environment, and the nation's nuclear stockpile is our highest priority," end quote, Hicks says. Quote, "We will get to the bottom of this and make no excuses." That's an incredibly written article, right?
That's crazy. How many journalists are going to be using this in the future?
Well,
already.
And if you imagine, can anyone write a fake news story? Of course, anyone can write a fake news story. But computers that can write fake news stories can write a hell of a lot more fake news stories, a hell of a lot faster in a way that can drastically change things. So there are concerns about large language models. So with that said, let's take a look at the things that her paper brought up. Some of these you guys won't like and won't agree with probably, and that's fine. I don't either. Okay. She says there's environmental and financial costs. These large language models take an enormous amount of processing power because they have so many inputs, so many parameters. And so she's saying it affects the carbon footprint. Okay. Well, I'm sure Google doesn't. So by the way, Google's overall complaint is that she cited problems without citing counter solutions and things they could do to mitigate it. Why? Well, because from Google's perspective, they don't want their researchers saying, be afraid of large language models because they want large language models. Okay. So environmental and financial costs, she cites. Okay. Carbon footprint stuff. And the estimated cost of training the model in the first place is enormous. So there's a misallocation of resources, one that she has. Massive data, inscrutable models. This is the one where her die stuff comes in. She's worried that language models that are trained on current written stuff will be trained by racists and sexists and all these bigots, because that's who exists in reality, right? Because if you just scrape the internet, you'll get racism and bigotry, and that's what will happen. So basically, she's worried that non-social justice warriors are training these things, and that they're using data from non-SJW sources.
I did. That example you just read of the language model where the AI system wrote the story.
Right.
It didn't say. It would have been funny if she could point to something like that. Be like, look, it said a black woman was driving the train.
Right. Well, do you remember? Do you remember when Microsoft? I think it was Microsoft released their little AI Twitter bot. And they had to take it down almost immediately because it started becoming horribly racist.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, it became like massively racist really quickly.
Well, then maybe she has a point.
Yeah. No. Like, there are legitimate concerns that she has with this, I'm sure. Massive data, inscrutable models. That's the one we just talked about. Research opportunity cost. Basically, she's saying, look, it costs so much to do this. It's a misdirected research. These models don't even understand language. They're just good at manipulating it. We could be spending the money on something else. And the illusion of meaning. The final problem with the language models, the researchers say, is that because they're so good at mimicking real human language, it's easy to use them to fool people, right? There have been a few high-profile cases, such as the college student who turned out AI generated self-help and productivity advice blog, which went viral. So the dangers are obvious here, right? So, okay, her paper, I don't agree with some of this concerns, specifically, actually some of the sexist and racist stuff might be true, but, she wants it trained by SJWs. Okay. But you can see why Google might not.
If SJWs train it, it's still going to be sexist and racist.
Yeah, and just in a different way. She wants it a particular type of sexist and racist.
Yeah.
So, so you can see why Google might be pissed off about this paper and want there to be counterbalance in the paper. Like, for example, Google might want to say, well, yes, there's an environmental cost, but here's the way we can mitigate it, or here's how future tech is going to use less power or something, right? I don't know. And yeah, is it a little bit, is it censorious? Is it like, is Google behaving like an editor and a censor? Yes. Why? Because they pay her. So they can't stop her from publishing if she's not on their payroll, but she's on their payroll. So, is it morally upstanding? I don't know. Companies do it all the time. It's what they do. So, Sundar Pichai, Google CEO, had to respond to this whole mess.
This is going to be good.
It's actually not as exciting. It's pretty milquetoast. He just apologizes a little bit and says, we'll investigate, but we can read it.
I know, read through it. This is I love this because this is someone who is beholden to SJW ideology, now being subjected to the pitchforks from right. SJW ideology. And so he's walking this line. This is just really, I find these kind of forced apologies fascinating, not only for what they say, but for what they don't say. Anyway, but let's read through this.
Yeah. And she's being held up by many SJW Googlers as a martyr. So they're feeling pretty angry. So he says, the subject is committing to our work on racial equity and AI ethics.
Oh,
lovely. My favorite subject. Hi, everyone. One of the things I've been most proud of this year. Really, Sundar? God, if I were a shareholder in Alphabet, I would be like, can you fire the guy who's proud of the nonprofits? But instead proud of how many Googlers from across the company came together to address racial equity commitments. Yeah, that's why I invested. It's hard, important work. And while we're steadfast on our commitment to do better, we have a lot to learn and improve. This is that kind of contrite, we have a lot to learn. An important piece
to learn.
Right. By the way, I don't like Sundar, but like personal life is pretty impressive, by the way. If you don't know, if you want to read about Sundar's history, he was like, he didn't even touch a computer until later in life. He was like in India and poor. He's a success story if you ever heard of one. An important piece of this is learning from our experiences, like the departure of Dr. Timnit Gebru. Notice he uses the word departure because he doesn't want to take. I don't want to categorize it, so she did depart. That's not in dispute.
The departure. Okay.
I've heard the reaction to Dr. Gebru's departure loud and clear. It seems it seeded doubt and led some in our community to question their place at Google. I want to say how sorry I am for that. And I accept the responsibility for working to restore your trust. So he's sorry that you're questioning your place. First,
I think a computer wrote this apology.
Yeah, I was going to say this might have been a large language model apology because he's busy.
Yeah.
You know.
Just put the subject in there. Just put the subject in there and see what that computer
Oh my God, that would be the best. Can we get, all right, if anyone works in AI, I want an SJW apology engine where you can just say, like, you type in what you're apologizing for and to whom, and it just generates an SJW apology letter. Okay.
Yeah.
First, we need to assess the circumstances that led up to Dr. Gebru's departure, examining where we could have improved and led a more respectful process. We will begin a review of what happened to identify all the points where we can learn, considering everything from de-escalating strategies to new processes we can put in place. This is all, my God, this guy could be in a Dilbert cartoon right now, right? Jeff and I have spoken and are fully committed in doing this. One of the best aspects of Google's engineering culture is our sincere desire to understand where things go wrong and how we can improve. So this is just a big, we'll investigate. Oops.
Yeah, and then you have to accept responsibility for something, and that comes next. Here we go.
Second, we need to accept responsibility for the fact that a prominent Black female leader with immense talent left Google unhappily. Yeah, I'm sure. Does she need to accept any responsibility whatsoever? Probably not.
Why does it matter that she's Black and female? Why?
Well, I refer you to the subject, racial equity and AI ethics. But yes.
It doesn't matter. They would not be in this position if she were a white man.
Yeah, can you imagine that sentence? We need to accept responsibility for the fact that a prominent white male leader with immense talent left Google unhappily. I'm sure he wrote something similar when James Damore was fired.
First of all, if she were a white man and troublesome, as we suspect she might have been, they could have fired her a lot sooner. They wouldn't have had to wait for an opportunity for a convenient departure. But they wouldn't have had to wait for this person to make demands and say, I'm leaving if you don't meet these demands, and then say, whoopee, there's our out. But secondly, if they had done that, they wouldn't have then needed to do this kind of apology letter to the whole company, because it wouldn't have mattered. Oh, it's just a white guy.
Right. This loss has had a ripple effect through some of our least represented communities who saw themselves and some of their experiences reflected in Dr. Gebru's. It was also keenly felt because Dr. Gebru is an expert in an important area of AI ethics that we must continue to make progress on, progress that depends on our ability to ask ourselves challenging questions. All right, here we go, Sundar. It's incredibly important to me that our Black women and underrepresented Googlers know that we value you and you do belong at Google. And the burden of, and the burden of pushing us to do better should not fall on your shoulders. We started a conversation together earlier this year when we announced a broad set of racial equity commitments to take a fresh look at all of our systems, from hiring and leveling to promotion and retention, and to address the need for leadership accountability across all of these steps. The events of the last week are a painful but important reminder of the progress we still need to make. This is a top priority for me and Google Leads, and I want to recommit to translating the energy that we've seen this year into real change as we move forward into 2021 and beyond. Peace and love and happiness, Sundar's personal AI generator.
It doesn't say that. It just says Sundar for anyone
Okay.
listening.
Oh, sorry. I forget there's people listening.